So I wanted to make sure I started the recording. There you go, sir.
Okay, yeah, we definitely want to go ahead and start off with that one. All right, everybody, so good afternoon, Spartans. So as I was just saying, we had the opportunity today to host author Todd Henry for our Leader Professional Development Program. Todd is the best-selling author of 5 books focused on building career and personal development practices that help us succeed not only as professionals, but as individuals. I first heard of Todd's work from a friend of mine when he recommended the first of Todd's books, The Accidental Creative. And because that book itself, it helped him transition into a new leadership role. And to this day, I go back to The Accidental Creative very often. I've read it, I've marked it, I've tabbed it, I have notes in the margins, and I go back a lot of times when I find myself needing to refocus because I found the tools in there really helpful to me personally. Todd's influence overall is very widespread. His book, Die Empty, was selected by the editors at Amazon.com as one of the best books of 2013. His podcast, The Accidental Creative, has millions of downloads, and the book Herding Tigers, which we're here to talk about today, is currently sitting at 4.5 stars on Amazon. From my perspective, as I was just telling the group here, Todd, is one of the most useful books focused on leadership that I've read recently. All right, everybody, so that's enough for me. At this point in time, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Todd Henry.
Well, thank you so much. Wow, that was an amazing introduction. And I will say as an author, there's no better compliment you can pay than I completely tore up your book and it's unrecognizable because I've written in all the margins and tabbed all the pages. So thank you. That was a very generous introduction. Hello, my brilliant friends. I am excited to be with you virtually today. I know we've been trying to make this happen for a long time. I think a couple of years. We've been trying to figure out a time for me to be able to spend some time with you. I'm deeply honored to have the chance to share some insights with you today, hopefully generate some conversation within the group, and talk a little bit about what it takes to lead talented, creative people. We're going to talk about some of the principles from my book, Herding Tigers. For years I heard it said that leading talented people was like herding cats, and I felt that was a little bit demeaning. It was more like herding tigers because they are powerful, majestic creatures that can accomplish amazing things, but can also turn around and rip you to shreds if you don't lead them properly. So I've spent the last couple of decades of my life both studying creativity and innovation and leading teams of creative people. And by the way, when I say creative people, what I mean are people who have to solve problems every day. How many of you solve problems every day as a function of your job? Yes. How many of you solve other people's problems every day? All right, one final question. How many of you had a specific person in mind when I asked that last question? Right? Yeah. Oh, no. People raising their heads. That's what we do. As leaders, and especially leaders of problem solvers, of creative people, we have to solve problems every day. We have to facilitate problem solving on behalf of others. But this leads to an entirely unique set of dynamics. So we have to understand if we want to, first of all, countermand those dynamics, and then also be able to leverage our resources effectively, personally and organizationally. So one thing I know for certain on this planet is that southern heat will cause you to make some of the worst decisions of your life. And I know you're in Texas. I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. A couple of years ago, my family and I made a trip to Disney World in Orlando, and we were kind of walking around. It was really hot, so we decided to go into a gift shop to get out of the heat. Now, I don't know about you. I tend to avoid gift shops at all costs, but today it was really hot, so we went in. And as I stood there in the air conditioning, I found an air conditioning duct. And as I stood there in the air conditioning, I looked up and I saw what I've come to refer to as the perfect t-shirt. So I'm going to share it with you and explain to you why I believe it's the perfect t-shirt. It's called How to Draw Darth Vader. Let me walk you through it panel by panel. All right. Panel 1, start with the head and body. So far, so good. I think any of us could do this, right? This is pretty simple. Start with the head and body. Panel 2, add a cape. Again, so far, so good. Any of us could do this. Panel 3, draw the face, gloves, and boots. Again, so far, so good. Pretty simple. And finally, panel 4, add details and some shading, finished. Right? I think I laughed so hard I snorted when I saw this. Now, I think this is the perfect t-shirt for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's just funny. It is. It's just funny. But second of all, I think this is often how we talk about leadership. I do. I think that we talk about leadership as if it's all about the big principles. Let's just have a vision. Let's just find great people. Let's just put them against important problems, and voila, brilliant work pops out the other side. Who knew it was that easy to do brilliant work? But the reality is, and listen, all of us who have been in the metaphorical trenches, and some of you in the literal trenches, in metaphorical trenches, no. All of the brilliant work is delivered between panels 3 and 4. It's the result of a lot of talented, dedicated, driven people doing whatever it takes to make it happen. And that's great. Listen, many of us, most of us, hopefully all of us love the work that we get to do every day. We love the value we create through what we do. We do. But there are any number of pitfalls between panels 3 and 4 that can take us out. Today, we're going to focus on that space between panels 3 and 4. We're going to focus on the place where the rubber meets the road as we're leading talented, creative problem solvers, some of the pitfalls we can fall into and some of the ways that we can strategically navigate through those pitfalls. So as I mentioned, the gap between panels 3 and 4 is the affectionately named place in the middle. It's what I call it, the middle. Many people think leadership is about being on top. Leadership is not about being on top. Leadership is about being in the middle. I don't care who you are at what level of the organization, you are in the middle. The CEO of an international conglomerate still reports to the board. They're still in the middle. They still have stakeholders they have to report to. The chairman of the board has to report to shareholders, right? Every single leader has somebody they have to report to. They're in the middle, which means we have to deal with the pressure down. Expectations upon us as managers to get it right, to do it faster, to do it better, to do it more efficiently, and pressure up from the people on our team. When are you going to listen to my idea? When am I going to get an opportunity? When is it my turn to be promoted? You're not doing it right. I could do it better, right? All of these things are pressures that we experience in the middle, which raises an interesting question. Why would anyone want to do this? Really, why would anybody want to do this? I am thankful that there are people who are willing to step up, to stand in the gap, to lead. We need effective people in the middle who can manage that pressure up and the pressure down. So what then is the definition of a good leader of creative people, talented people standing in the middle, navigating both of those pressures up and down? I believe that a good leader of creative people, and again, I'm talking about problem solvers, accomplishes the work while developing the team to tackle new and more challenging work. I think you have to have all three of these qualities. So accomplishes the work, that's where most people put a period. As long as we get the job done, that's all that matters. But that's not all that matters. When you're leading a team, you also have to focus on developing that team, teaching them not just what works, but why it works, so that they can learn to strategically solve problems on their own instead of just you telling them what to do. And then to tackle new and more challenging work. If your team's capacity is not growing, then you are failing your team as a leader. If your team is solving the same problems in the same way that they were last year, then you are failing in one of your primary roles as a leader, which is to increase the capacity of your team to tackle new and more challenging work. Work is not static. The opportunities and the threats that we face are not static. They're continually morphing and changing. So we have to be developing capacity in our team. I believe that the definition of every creative professional, or the ambition of every creative professional, should be to be three things: prolific, brilliant, and healthy, all at the same time. Prolific meaning we're doing a lot of work because we have to do that. Brilliant meaning we're doing good work because we also have to do that. But healthy meaning that we're working sustainably, that we're working in a way that's going to enable us to continue to produce prolific and brilliant work over a period of time to come. That doesn't mean that we have tons of space in our schedule, we're never stressed. No, that's not what I mean. What I mean is we're not machines. We cannot go through perpetual cycles of crash, burn, refresh, crash, burn, refresh over a long period of time, or else we will eventually lose the prolific and brilliant pieces as well. And, it's really easy to get two of these three right. We can be prolific and we can be brilliant. We can miss on the healthy piece. So we're doing a lot of work and we're doing good work, but we're missing on the healthy piece. There's a technical term I coined for these people, and it's fried. And as I mentioned, if you don't get the healthy piece right, the sustainability piece right, you will eventually lose the prolific and brilliant piece as well. We need rhythm as human beings. We need ebb and flow as human beings, especially if we want to do our best work. If we want to notice those slightly non-intuitive dots that we need to connect in order to stay ahead of opportunities and threats. Of course, we can also be healthy. We can be sustainable. We can be brilliant, meaning we're doing good work, but we're not prolific. We can't keep up with demand. And I call these people unreliable because they can't be counted on to deliver when it matters most. And just to close the loop, of course, we can be prolific, meaning we're doing a lot of work, and we can be healthy, meaning that we're working sustainably. But our work is terrible. It's awful. And there's a technical term for these people and teams. It's fired, because you're not going to keep your job for very long if you're not producing consistently great work. So friends, as you think about your life as a leader, and as you think about your team right now, especially in the midst of these times that we're going through right now, we are not only dealing with resolving the complexity of our normal work, but the complexity of how do we even interact with one another in this world that we're living in right now, with all of the complexities of the pandemic has brought, right? How are you and your team doing on this matrix of prolific, brilliant, and healthy? If we want to be firing on all cylinders, there are two things that the talented people on your team need. And I'm going to use this as a framework to set up the rest of our conversation. The two things that the people on your team need from you more than anything else. The first is stability. Your team needs a stable environment in which to do its creative problem solving. A stable environment in which to think abstractly, to connect dots, to do inventive work when necessary. But in order to do that, they need clarity from you, clarity of expectations and clarity of process primarily. So they need to know, first of all, that expectations are clear and what you want from them, the problem you actually want them solving, is very clear, and you've defined it for them. You've defined it simply. It's not needlessly complex. And they know exactly what it is that you expect of them and when you expect it of them. And then clarity of process. They need to know that the process isn't going to shift halfway through the project, that the ground isn't going to change beneath their feet, but that instead, the process has been defined in such a way that they can throw themselves fully into it, knowing that you are going to protect the resources they need to be able to get the job done. And then finally, they need protection from you as it relates to stability. They need to know that you're going to protect the time and the energy and the resources necessary, and that you're going to get buy-in from all of the stakeholders at appropriate points in the process to ensure that their work isn't going to be wasted. And this often happens in a lot of organizations I work with. People will, the manager is perfectly clear and they've created a perfectly stable environment, but because they're not securing buy-in at critical moments from any stakeholder who could potentially throw a wrench in the works, later in the process, that stakeholder steps in and completely changes everything. And so all of that work to that point has been wasted because they weren't protecting the process. They weren't securing buy-in at critical moments from the people on their team. So we need to make sure that we're providing the stability that our team needs to be able to throw themselves fully into the work that we're asking them to do. But they also need challenge. Creative, talented people want to be pushed. They want to take risks. They want to try new things. But here's a shocker to a lot of people. People need to be told it's okay to take risks. Even talented people with track records sometimes need to be told, hey, it's okay for you to take this risk. It's all right. And not only is it okay, but I'm going to challenge you to take that risk because I know you're capable of more than what you think you're capable of. And so we're going to walk through this together, but I'm going to push you out on the edge of the high dive, and I'm going to make you jump into the pool because I know you can do this. Creative people want that kind of challenge. Now, as you can imagine, stability and challenge exist in tension with one another. So as you increase the amount of challenge in an organization, you tend to decrease the stability because often you're trying to do work that you're not prepared for, you don't have the resources for, or the processes for, right? Because you're tackling new things, and that's fine for a season. But when you live in that space of high challenge and low stability, over time, your team is going to grow disillusioned and angry. They're gonna stop trusting you because you're asking them to do things that you're not equipping them to do. You're asking them to do more than what they're being provided resources to tackle. And so your team is going to grow disillusioned, disconnected, and angry. Of course, when there's low challenge and low stability, these teams are lost. I very rarely encounter a team who would describe themselves as in this quadrant. So we're just going to kind of move on, much like the hit TV series Lost, things are unlikely to end well. Okay, let's move on. When you have low challenge and high stability, so you have a lot of process, a lot of clarity, a lot of protection, but people aren't being challenged. Often they report that they feel stuck. They feel like they're not really stepping out into new territory, and they begin seeking greener pastures because creative people inherently want to be challenged. Of course, when we get the right mix of stability and challenge, that's where teams tend to thrive. This is the place where creative people and creative teams really come alive. But here's the thing, that mix of stability and challenge is going to be different for every person on your team. This is not a set it and forget it thing. Your team's going to move, by the way, and individuals are going to move from that upper right quadrant to the upper left quadrant to the lower right quadrant. People are going to move around this matrix pretty consistently. Your job from moment to moment, from week to week, from month to month is to figure out where might we be right now and how can I provide more stability right now? How can I provide more challenge right now for my team when they start to feel disengaged or when I start to notice that their work is suffering? You need to keep your finger on the pulse of what your team needs from you at any given moment in order to make sure that they're getting from you what it is that they need. Okay, so it's not a set it and forget it thing, and also it's not a team thing, it's an individual thing, which is a little frustrating, but you need to be in contact with your team and help and understand from them what it is they need in order to feel like they're thriving, the right mix of stability and challenge. Some people might be, hey, just wind me up and let me go and check in with me once every couple of weeks, and they're fine with that, right? Other people might need more frequent check-ins in order to feel like they're getting the stability that they need, the clarity of expectations they need. Okay, so make sure that you're staying in touch with your team. All right, so how do we provide stability and challenge? I want to talk about two core concepts today. And both of these are critical. And the second one is the one that we really wanted to focus on today, but the first one is kind of the bedrock for the second one. So I want to talk about the first one first. We have to earn the right to be followed every single day. All right, I want you to think about, this is sort of a rhetorical question. Please don't answer this out loud, but why should people follow you? Why should the people on your team follow you? Is it because somebody told them to follow you? Is it because they're mandated to follow you? Is there anything, because people will do that, people will obey, but are they really following? There's a big difference between obeying and following, right? Okay, I want to ask a twin question, which is, I want you to think about a leader who has had a tremendous impact on your life, somebody without whom you would not be the same leader that you are today. What were the qualities of that person that made them so effective? Why did they impact your life in such a significant way? And I've done this exercise with thousands, tens of thousands of people all over the world. And almost always when I ask people this question in a workshop format, they'll reply with things like, when they said something, they did it. They challenged me to do things I didn't think I could do, and they believed in me, and they not only believed in me, but they put their money where their mouth was, and they forced me to have to take risks and do new things and become a better leader myself. They'll say things like, they spoke courage into me as a manager. When you, at the heart of it, when you get to the root of all of these responses I typically get, they all come down to one word, and that word is trust. Trust is the currency of creative teams. Trust is the currency of creative work. You cannot do brilliant, world-changing work without trust. You can't take creative risks without trust. You simply can't. But many of us have a false understanding of what trust is. We tend to think about trust kind of like a bank account. We think, oh, if I put a little bit of trust in the trust bank account, that's great. And then if I make a withdrawal every so often, I can take a little bit of trust out. That's okay because I've got enough trust built up that it doesn't really matter. But that's not really the way that trust works on teams, in my experience. Rather, trust is not a bank account. Trust is more like a water balloon. You fill it, you fill it, you fill it, you fill it. And then if you puncture it even in a tiny way, you often lose it everywhere. It doesn't have to be a big breach of trust. Listen, I'm positive that most of you are probably not overtly lying to your team. You're not behaving in openly unethical ways, right? It's usually not something big. It's usually small things that we do that begin to erode the trust on our team. So people will obey us. They have to, but they're not really following us. There's a big difference between doing what I say and putting yourself fully under my leadership. Okay, so what are a couple of the small ways that we might breach trust? We might puncture that water balloon in such a way that it causes us to lose trust when it matters most. The first is something that I call declaring undeclarables. All right, so just by example, a couple of years ago, my family and I were watching the news, and there was a bear spotted in southern Ohio where we live. Now, we live in Cincinnati, like in close to Cincinnati. This is not a common thing. We don't have bears in Ohio, so this is kind of a big deal. And the news was all over it, as you can imagine. I mean, for weeks it was like Beargate, and they have these scary photos of bears and all this. The bear was spotted, but the bear was like 2 counties over from us. It was like 100 miles from the city where we live. But my kids are kind of freaked out. So wanting to be a good dad, one day I said, hey, listen, kids, listen. That bear is like 100 miles from here, right? It is 2 counties over. It's all frolicking with its bear friends, eating berries, whatever bears do. It's fun. That bear is not coming anywhere close to the city. It's not. There's not a chance in the world you're ever going to see that bear. And that satisfied my kids. It did. It made them feel better in the moment. 2 weeks later, I pull out of my driveway, I take a right, I go to the bottom of our road, and there's a news crew camped out at the bottom of our road. And I'm thinking, well, that's weird. That doesn't happen every day. So I rolled down my window. I said, hey, what's going on? And they said, hey, you know that bear that we've been talking about on the news? All the blood drained out of my face, right? I said, yeah. And they said, that bear is across the street right now. It's down there in the creek. Do you want to see it? It's right over there. I kid you not, friends. A block from my house. It was like I was being sent a message, right? I hear you. What do you want from me? Crazy. Over the next 2 weeks, that bear was spotted in every single place that my family goes. Bear spotted in Chipotle parking lot, looks hungry for small children. I mean, I'm serious. Every single, at our church, at our friend's house, it was in our neighbor's trash. It was all over our neighborhood. Let's just say that dad lost a little bit of credibility with the whole bear thing, right? Why? I mean, seriously, for like 6 months after that, it was like, Dad, is that really true? Or is that kind of like the bear thing? I mean, for months and months after that, I had, in my effort to try to make my kids feel good, I had said something that I couldn't absolutely guarantee I was going to deliver on. So it accomplished the purpose of making them feel better, of quelling their anxiety in the moment. But in so doing, I had declared something I couldn't guarantee I was going to deliver on. And when I couldn't deliver on it, I breached trust with them. And we do this all the time as leaders. I will absolutely meet with you next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Oh, you know what? Something came up. I'm sorry. We're going to have to push it to next week. Oh, something came up again. You know what? We'll just have to punt this month. Let's meet next month. I'm absolutely going to use your idea on this proposal. Oh, you know what? Actually, somebody else came up with a different idea, so we'll consider this next time. We say things, and it seems like an insignificant thing in our mind, but people take it seriously. And unfortunately, when we don't deliver, we have declared an undeclarable, and it's like a little puncture in that water balloon. And so when we need people to trust us in big ways, they no longer trust us. So we cannot declare undeclarables, friends. We have to be careful on that front. The second way we breach trust is by being a superhero, by playing the superhero, by keeping our team out of our decision-making process and pretending like we have all the answers. When we don't invite our team into our decision-making process, we fail on 2 fronts. Number one, our team, we think that we're making them inspiring trust because we think that they think we're competent because we've got it all figured out. But it makes our team anxious. When they don't know what's going on in our mind, when they don't see how we're thinking about a problem, it makes them anxious. And number two, remember that definition of good creative leadership? We're not developing our team to tackle new and more challenging work. We're not showing them our decision-making process. So we're not modeling for them what good decision-making looks like, which is one of the functions of a leader. Now, you can't share everything with your team. That's not what I'm talking about. But what I mean is, when you push your team away and refuse to ever invite them, especially if you have a couple of people you're grooming for leadership, if you don't invite them into your decision-making process, you are failing them as a leader. Okay, so don't play the superhero because it backfires. It has the opposite effect of what you think it does. And then the main thing to consider as it relates to trust is this. Your greatest potential to cause damage as a leader is directly tied to your biggest insecurity. Both of those things I just talked about, declaring undeclarables, and the second one being, oh my goodness. Second one being be a superhero. Sorry, I've got a third one I normally talk about, so I'm used to talking about. So being a superhero and declaring undeclarables, both of them are directly tied to insecurity. Insecurity on the first front being that I want you to feel good, and I'm insecure as a leader, so I'm going to say whatever it takes to make you feel good because that makes me feel good because I'm insecure about your willingness to follow my leadership. So I want everybody to feel good, so I'm going to declare an undeclarable to quell that tension, even though that's not realistic. Or I'm going to, in some capacity, make you think I've got it all figured out because I'm insecure that I don't have it all figured out, so I'm going to push you away. Your greatest potential to cause damage as a leader is directly tied to your biggest insecurities. So we have to make certain, friends, that we're identifying those insecurities and wrestling them to the ground. Okay. The second thing we have to do to create stability and challenge, and this is more on the challenge front. So trust is about stability. This is more on the challenge front, is we have to learn to loosen our grip. And this is a message for control freaks like me. Hello, my name is Todd. I'm a control freak. I am. I like to control the work. When I'm in a group setting, in a live setting, sometimes I'll ask, how many of you are a little nervous that you're sitting here right now and work is getting done back at the office, right? And I mean, hands go up like crazy. And frankly, my hand goes up too, because I like to control things. I do. But the problem is when you try to control the work, you're not fulfilling a fundamental role that you have as a manager. Okay, so we have to transition from a mindset of control, mindset of influence. See, influence is about principle, leading by principle. Control is about leading by presence. Most of our career is a giant setup. It is a giant setup. What do I mean by that? Well, early in your career, as a maker or as an executor of your role, your performance and your career progress are primarily defined by how well you control things. Listen, if you become known as somebody who gets things done, as somebody who can accomplish things effectively and efficiently, and typically you do that because you're very disciplined and you control the work and you get it done, your career is going to advance as your ability to control the work and perform grows. Here's the challenge. At some point, you make the pivot from maker to manager. When you make that pivot from maker to manager, if you continue to try to control the work, your performance is actually going to decrease. Why? Because you cannot physically do all of the work that the team you're tasked with is accountable for. If you try to control your team's influence and effectiveness will shrink in concentric circles to the limits of your own personal involvement. And that does not scale. So we have to transition our mindset from a mindset of control to a mindset of influence. And as I mentioned, control is all about presence. Control is about being here. Control is about being in the work. It's about owning the work and defining the work and shaping the work and doing the work. Whereas principle is about teaching people not just what to do, but how to think about the work itself. Not just what works, but why it works. Jim Collins, in his phenomenal book, How the Mighty Fall, said that one of the marks of organizations that are on the verge of failure is when we have an entire team of people who understand tactics without understanding why those tactics work. So they know what to do because they've been trained what to do, and that's fine, but they don't understand the governing principles behind those tactics. So when the circumstances change, which, by the way, things are changing faster than they ever have in human history, right? I mean, understanding a set of tactics may have worked 150 years ago because things changed every 20, 30 years, right? But now things are changing every 20, 30 days in terms of how we have to look at the world. So we have to not only understand what works, but why it works. What are the governing principles behind it? We have to train our team to be able to understand that. We have to train ourselves to understand it as well, which means leading by influence. So control is all about credit. I want to be seen as the person who gets things done. it's important to me for my career progress that I be seen as a person getting things done. That's often why people slip into control. Influence is about impact. It is more important that we get things done. It's more important that this value is created than it is that I am the one seen as the person getting it done. So I am more than happy to invest in others who are going to actually go out and create that value, which will have magnified impact on the world, instead of just being the person doing it all the time, which means my influence is never going to grow beyond my personal reach. Okay. Control is all about the short game. It's about getting it done here and now, making it right here and now. Influence is all about the long game. It's about investing in other people, recognizing that they are going to invest in people and they are going to invest in people. And my influence is going to grow over time as a leader as that investment bears out. Control is about temporary principles, what works here and now. So I'm going to tell you how to do it here and now. I'm going to teach you tactics. Influence is about timeless principles. I'm not going to teach you what to do. I'm going to teach you what to do, how to do it, and why it works. I'm going to teach you principles, timeless principles, not just temporary tactics. Control is all about reputation. It's about making sure that I am seen as the kind of person who gets things done. Influence is all about reproduction. It's about reproducing in other people so that they can reproduce in other people and they can reproduce in other people and our influence grows. So in order to do this, in order to lead by influence, instead of leading by control, we have to establish a point of view. Do you have a leadership philosophy as a leader, as a manager? Is it clear to your team what you expect from them and when you expect it? Have you set effective guardrails around the work that your team does? Is the playing field well defined for them? Okay. We have to establish guide rails to help our team understand what's inbounds, what's out of bounds, the guiding principles by which our team does their work. D. Hawk, the founder and chair emeritus of Visa, said, simple, clear purpose and principles give rise to complex and intelligent behavior. Complex rules and regulations give rise to simple and stupid behavior. And I see this in highly regulated industries and highly regulated organizations. Often people just shut their minds off. They do, because basically thinking is not going to help you. Just settle in and just write it out, right? So when we think about our leadership philosophy, we need to make it simple. So I'm going to give you a couple of areas where you can begin to establish principles to help your team understand what it is you expect of them. Quality of work. Does your team know what quality work looks like? Or is it just, I know it when I see it? Or it's just a gut feel thing? That's not sufficient. You need to be able to define for your team what quality work looks like. This is quality, this is not quality. Let me explain to you the difference so that you know what you're shooting for. Right? What about risk and failure? What kind of risks are acceptable? What kind of risks are unacceptable? So one senior leader of an organization told me that an early manager expressed to her on her, I think it was her first day at work, said, listen, I have 2 principles for you I want you to follow. Make mistakes of commission, not omission, on behalf of the client. And number 2, always believe I have your back if you fail. I will go to bat for you. If you're making an aggressive mistake on behalf of the client, I will go to bat for you. She said that gave her incredible freedom in how she interacted with clients and the kinds of things she was willing to do because her manager had established that principle for her. Listen, I've got your back, so go for it. If you're making an aggressive mistake and you fail on behalf of a client, I'm going to defend you. I am going to defend you. And that leader ended up becoming the CEO of the organization and led the entire company at one point. But I think that's a great example of establishing parameters around risk and failure. I once, by the way, I don't know if I recommend this, but I once spoke to a group for the Air Force, and they said that the general told them that I want you to do, or told one of his right-hand people, I want you to do something every day you think will get me fired. That might be a little aggressive. I'm just saying that might be a little aggressive, right? But it's just something, again, it's a leadership principle. Right. The idea behind that is I don't want you to play it safe. I want you to do stuff that's going to help us grow, that's going to help us think about things in different ways. Okay. What about the right idea? How do you know when an idea is the right idea or the wrong idea? Do you have a framework for that? And can you share that with your team? What about credit? How do we establish credit for good work? How is recognition doled out on our team? What about conflict? How do you want conflict handled on your team? Is there a protocol for that? come to me, work it out yourself. What is that? But your team needs to understand that as part of a leadership philosophy. Now, what about opportunity? Who gets promoted, who gets recognized, who gets celebrated? How do they get celebrated? What does that look like? Listen, their experience of you is going to primarily be their experience of the organization. And this is true. And we've seen this in a lot of companies that I've worked with. We've heard the phrase, people don't quit companies, they quit managers. And that's very true. You can be a pocket of health. You can be a pocket of sanity, a pocket of stability and challenge in the midst of really trying times and really trying circumstances. You can. But you have to commit yourself to being somebody who's going to lead by influence, not by control. Because when you don't, often ghost rules begin to emerge. Ghost rules are these invisible narratives that begin to creep into our organization. Things like, that'll never work around here. I know you've never heard that before. I know you've never heard that, but that'll never work around here. Or so-and-so will never go for that. Or this isn't going to work because we tried that back in 1982, right? These are the kinds of things that begin to emerge. Ghost rules, invisible narratives that limit how we interact with one another, Ghost rules, by the way, often fill the vacuum where there's a lack of a leadership philosophy. If you haven't clearly expressed a principle, that is a vacuum that will often be filled by a ghost rule because your team is assuming they know what your leadership philosophy is, even if you haven't expressed it. They think you have one, even if you haven't told them what you expect of them. And often that's in the form of ghost rules or invisible narratives that you would never agree with. So any of those places, like quality of work, risk and failure, right idea, any of those places you haven't defined your philosophy for your team, understand that they probably are filling that vacuum with their own assumptions about what you expect of them. All right. So we have to transition from leading by control to leading by influence, which is tough because we care about the work. We care about the outcome. The work you do is so important. It's so critical for so many of us. And I understand that. And I also know that over the course of time, if we don't transition to leading by influence instead of by control, our effectiveness will never scale beyond our personal reach. We will never, if we don't entrust in others, not just what to do, but how to think about the work and why it works, and begin to grow that capacity and invest in people and reproduce in that way, then our own leadership will curtail at some point. We will not be as effective as we could be. All right. So why is this important? Well, it's important because we're all building a body of work. We all are. When we show up every single day, we are building a delta, a change that exists on this earth because we walk this earth. We're building that delta through every decision that we make. Every single day. I don't care what it is. Any place you add value with your family, with your spouse, with your partner, with your friends, with your, how you tip the barista at the coffee shop. It doesn't matter. Every single thing you do in this world is funneling up into a body of work, a delta, a change that exists because you are here on this planet. And that body of work is going to stand as a testament to your life and your leadership. The problem is for many of us over the course of time, we start off with this clear understanding of who we are and our values, and they overlap quite a bit with the values of the organization that we're a part of. But over time, many of us allow ourselves to become subsumed by the organization to the point where there's no longer any differentiation between us and the organization that we're a part of. And listen, that's great. It's fantastic that we identify with the work that we do and we identify with the organization that we're a part of. And in your situation specifically, it's critical that you identify with the organization that you're a part of. Absolutely. And at the same time, the greatest value that you bring to the organization that you serve and the team of people you lead is your personal perspective and your personal set of values and your framework for decision making. You must protect those personal frameworks at all costs as a manager. You have to know where you draw lines. You have to know how you make decisions. People have to look at you and say, listen, I may not always agree with that person, but I totally trust that they are doing what they believe to be right. We cannot become subsumed or we will lose our team. I love how one of my favorite thinkers, Thomas Merton, talked about this dynamic. He said, there can be an intense egoism in following everyone else. People are in a hurry to magnify themselves by imitating what is popular and too lazy to think of anything better. Hurry ruins saints as well as artists. They want quick success, and they're in such a hurry to get it, they cannot take time to be true to themselves. And when the madness is upon them, they argue that their very haste is a species of integrity. They want quick success. In other words, they want control. They want to control everything and get quick success, but they're in such a hurry to get it, they can't take time to be true to themselves. They no longer listen to those core ethics, to the things that drive them, to those core fundamental frameworks that are so important to who they are as a person and as a leader, which is why I think the most important question that you can ask as a leader in your life is, how will you define success? What does success look like to you as a leader? What does that word even mean to you as a leader? In 100 years, the projects that we're working on, all of the things that we're doing right now that are so important to us, most of those things are probably going to be forgotten in 100 years. They are. But the investment that you make in the people you lead will be transferred to the next generation, the next generation, next generation, until generations from now. People are going to be influenced by your leadership if you invest in the people you lead in a way that increases their capacity instead of just controlling their work. There's a Greek proverb that says, a society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they know they shall never sit. As a leader, you have an opportunity every day to plant a tree that you may never get to sit under, ever. But 30, 40 years from now, there's going to be a person sitting under the shade of that tree, and they'll never even know that you were the one who planted it. But they will be sitting under the shade of a tree that you planted. So my challenge to you, friends, is be the kind of leader who in 20 years, when I come into a group like this and I ask, hey, I want you to think of a leader who had influence on your life. I want you to be that leader. Be the leader that you always wish that you had. And be the kind of leader who's going to make echoes for generations to come. Those are the kinds of leaders that we need today in the world. All right? Thank you very much for your attention. I think we're going to have some time for some Q&A. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely, Todd. We should. I'm not sure if you have a hard stop, but we had planned for at least about 20 minutes. I don't know if you have another engagement after this.
No, 20 minutes is perfect.
Okay, excellent. Hey, so with that, over to the floor for the first question. Come on up. I'm going to start calling on people. There we go. All right. Can he see?
You can see our people, right, Todd?
I can, yes. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Hello, sir. My name is Peyton LeDuc. I'm a lieutenant, a platoon leader in 53rd Quartermaster Company.
LT, speak up. We got you too.
So I had a question. So you end the book with a poem by Percy Bysshe Shelley, Ozymandias. I really love that poem. And I was wondering, like, what your opinion is in terms of applying this to the Army, because that poem really kind of echoes to me in terms of there's something that when you die, when you are done in your job, like 100 years from now, it could just be ruins. Like the organization that you're a part of that you put all your life into may not continue after you. But for us in the Army, the Army will always continue without us. Yeah. So I don't know if you have any sort of advice, kind of transferring what you said in your book toward the corporate world, where there's CEOs and like maybe the company will fail because of you or succeed because of you. But in the Army, that's not how it is. We are the Army, and the Army can function without us. So I don't know if you might have tips for especially new leaders in the Army regarding that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the question. And I really meant when I said at the beginning, I'm deeply, deeply humbled by the opportunity to spend time with you. I know how valuable your time is. And I'm deeply grateful for the work that each and every one of you does. It is a great question because military work is not like corporate work, and all of you know that. It is in some ways because you have to organize and you have projects and you have tactics and strategies and all of that. So in some ways it's similar, but it's like a parallel track, right? And as you mentioned, your organization is going to be around long after you're gone, which in the corporate world, there are any number of perks and benefits and other things that can be distracting and can kind of tempt you to get off course, especially get off course in terms of your what's being called out of you and your own purpose and your own body of work that you're building. I seriously doubt that most of you joined the military for the flashy cars and the fast lifestyle. Like, I'm pretty certain that's probably not why you're serving, right? You're serving because you're bending your life around a deeper ethic. And the value that you are creating and the ethic that you are living out is going to be the measure of your life. It is. Nobody at the end of the day is necessarily going to point to any individual. There are some people for sure. If you study military history, there are people that you can point to and say, this decision on this day created this outcome. But more often than not, it's collective groups of people making it happen. So I think that question of what am I bending my life around is the more important metric. How will you define success for yourself as a leader? How will you define success for those that you serve over the course of time? I think becomes the defining question. When you're serving in an organization that at the end of the day, like you said, it's not about increasing shareholder value. It's about increasing the safety of, or increasing the common defense, right? Increasing the sense of well-being of the people that you're serving at the end of the day. And I, for one, am deeply grateful about that. So I think that wrestling that question of what do I want my life to be about? How will I define success for myself as a leader? If I look back in 40 years of my career, how will I know that I have done what I set out to do? The further you advance in leadership, that's going to become harder and harder. So I had the chance to share, speak at Air Command College a couple of years ago for the Air Force, and one of the speakers there was actually General Casey, who I'm sure most of you are very familiar with. And General Casey caught up with me in the green room, and it's kind of a funny story because I was eating a blueberry muffin at the time. I had my back turned, and I turned around, and here's this general standing in front of me, and I think I spit blueberry all over his nice suit, at the time. But he asked me about creativity, and I don't even remember what I told him in response to his question, but I did have the presence of mind to say, General, what's the most important thing I should know about leadership? And he didn't even think about it. He immediately said, you need to have people around you who will speak truth to you well before you realize you need people around you to speak truth to you. Because by the time you realize you need those people around you, it's probably too late. By the time you realize it, you're probably at a level of leadership where it's going to be difficult to find people who will speak unvarnished truth to you because they now have a stake in how you perceive them. So I guess my biggest encouragement is twofold. Number one, understand what you're building your life around and what you're bending your life around, and know how you will define success for yourself. Regardless of your circumstances, your role, your position, how you grow in your career, how will you define success for yourself? What will that look like? What are you bending your life around? And number two, identify people right now in your life who will keep you on that track. People who will speak truth to you because they care about you, because they have skin in the game, not just because they want to give you their opinion, but people who truly care about you and truly want to see you succeed. Identify those people and begin to build them into your life right now, because by the time you realize you need them, it might be too late to find them. So those, I think, would be the two biggest pieces of advice on that front. Is that helpful at all?
Yes, sir, it is. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the next question. And if you know you've got a question, let's start moving to the front so we can kind of cut down some of the traffic.
Cool. Hi there, sir. My name is Lieutenant Humison. I'm also a platoon leader. At the beginning of the book, you briefly mentioned opacity, where the supervisors or the clients might not necessarily see the process, just the result. Yeah. How can we properly manage that to kind of keep some of the mystery maybe, but help set realistic expectations for our team?
Wonderful question. Often the people who are asking you to do things don't understand what it takes to get those things done. Maybe they saw it happen once, and maybe it took your team an entire, like, nights and weekends for weeks on end in order to deliver those results, because you realized it was important. So you were willing to do whatever it took to make it happen. But the people, your stakeholders, don't necessarily see that. So, when they ask for it again, they don't understand why you can't do it. There's a bit of opacity around the process. So what you need to do as a leader in those situations is make certain that you're communicating the process to the people that you're serving, and help them understand what the trade-offs might be or the costs might be of doing what they're asking you to do. And that's what any good manager in any organization would do. It's just difficult to do when you're speaking to power, right? So visibility into process is really important, because people don't understand. When they're moving big rocks, sometimes people get caught in between. There are second and third order consequences that they're not aware of. So that's really your role, is to pay attention to those second and third order consequences and make sure that you're communicating the chain. Hey, you may not even realize you're doing this. I guarantee you there's nobody sitting around thinking, how can we make everybody's life more miserable? Nobody's sitting in an office thinking that. It's just that they're making big decisions, and those big decisions have implications. They trickle down. So we need to be communicating the second and third order consequences up the chain, so people understand the implications of their actions, and also talking about process with people so they understand what it really costs to get things done. People don't understand the time and the energy and the money and all of that it sometimes takes just to accomplish something that seems very simple to them, because they don't understand the process. So giving them a little bit of transparency into that process and communicating in the way that, well, I'm not just being difficult, I'm trying to help you understand what it really takes. And by the way, I'm also not going to inflate timelines just to give myself a buffer. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be very transparent, very trustworthy in how I communicate. But I do want you to understand, here are the implications of what you're asking me to do. Now, I have a friend, Ricardo Crespo, who is the global creative chief at 20th Century Fox. And he would often use this tactic when his manager or the chairman of Fox or the CEO of the company would come to him and say, I've got this very important thing I want you to do. Or he's sitting with Steven Spielberg, right, trying to come up with creative concepts for the next thing. And they ask him for something impossible. He would say, and again, this may or may not be possible in your situation, but it's an example, right? I love that idea. That's a great idea. And we would love to do that. Of the things that are already on our plate that are occupying all of our resources right now, which of these would you like me to move to the back burner so we can take that on? Because we'd love to do it, right? But help me prioritize, because we only have so many resources to go around. Now, I understand that may be a difficult conversation in your circumstance, and it may not work, but it's a principle, right? We still only have, the pie is only so big of resources. Each of us has 168 hours a week. That's it, period. The people on your team, and your work only gets a percentage of those hours. So we need to make sure that we're communicating the cost of things to the people up the chain, as well as the consequences of their decisions. So is that helpful?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, sir. So I'm First Class Mancha. It's a pleasure to hear you speak just now. So I really enjoyed the equation you had at the beginning, where you talked about prolific plus brilliant minus healthy equals fried. And I know, like, whenever you're within an organization, the further you move up within the organization, the greater the demands that are going to be upon you because of the position you hold. Mm-hmm. And so the greater the propensity for you to be able to operate in that space. And so I know, like, in the positions we serve in, the demands are not going to change, right? So maybe if you could just unpack that a little bit more of how do you bring good balance to the prolific, brilliant, and healthy, even in an op tempo where the demands on you are not going to change. So how do you do that?
Yeah, that is a great question. And also it's not just the physical requirements of you, but it's as you grow in your leadership, it's also the psychological pressure that you experience, right? It's the weight of the responsibility that you're carrying can have take a tremendous psychological toll as well, on your ability to be prolific, brilliant, healthy. So what I will share with you is there's no magic bullet, unfortunately, but what I've discovered among people senior leaders who have managed to maintain that, is that they have rhythms in their life. They have practices in their life that keep them in that place of viability. So they do things like they have regular times where they are off the grid. And that's, you will not reach them from 7 to 8 in the morning. You just won't reach them because they're off the grid from 7 to 8 in the morning. Or they every day at lunch, they take a walk and they just get out of the office and they have space to be able to clear their mind and recoup and refresh. Or they have time multiple times a week where they sit and they study and they just fill their mind with valuable stimulus. And it could be in the evening, it could be in the morning, whenever it is. They are investing their time, not just spending their time. So they're developing new skills. They're, it's surprising to people to hear that a lot of senior leaders I encounter have some kind of a hobby. They have something they do that challenges them to be developing new skills, to be trying new things, to be expressing themselves in different ways. It's surprising to people, but the funny thing is it makes them more effective as leaders because it's almost, there's a principle, a scientific principle called the breakout principle. There's a phenomenal book by, I think it's Herbert Benson, wrote a book about this research where they discovered that if you spend time working on a problem and then you break away from it and do something mindless and completely disconnected, when you come back to the problem, often your mind has been working on that problem in the background while you were disengaging your executive brain from it. Your mind continues to work on it. So when you come back and you re-engage your executive brain, you have a sudden breakthrough. And I'm sure many of you have experienced that. You can replicate that process in your life. And one of the ways that senior leaders do that is they have a hobby. They have something they do where they break away. So the guiding principle here is we need to have rhythms and practices in our life to keep us in a place of viability. If we wake up in the morning and the first thing we do is check our smartphone for whatever's going on, and then we scarf down breakfast and we run to our workplace and we're just 90 miles an hour all day long, and then we go home and we scarf down dinner and we're if that's our life, there's no ebb, there's no flow, there's no peak, there's no trough in our life. It's a recipe for burnout. So you own your process, you own your life, you own your rhythms, and you're at the end of the day you're charged with delivering value. So you need to keep yourself in a place where you can deliver whatever value you're charged with delivering. You're not being paid for the time you spend. You're being paid for the value you deliver at the end of the day as a manager. So you need to make certain that you are protecting whatever resources are necessary to deliver that value. And the way that most successful executives I've worked with do that is they have rhythms in their life. They have practices in their life around study, about breaking away, about focus, about managing their energy, managing their commitments, making sure they're only saying yes to things that are truly contributive, and they're protecting that body of work that they're building.
Hi, good afternoon, sir. I'm Lieutenant Hickey. In the book, you talk a little bit about talent management and some of the characteristics of being a builder, fixer, or optimizer. My question is, do you have any advice to get better performance from someone who doesn't fit that characteristic that you most desire in a position, or how to influence them to shift their priorities?
That is a really tricky, it's a tricky situation because, in a lot of organizations, you can just move people around. If people aren't a good fit, but I know in your organization, jobs have to get done, period. I doubt there's often a lot of discussion about how are you enjoying your role, right? It's more like, hey, we got to get things done. Things have to happen. And so, I would, first of all, you need to have a conversation about their experience of their role. Talk to me about moments when you felt deeply engaged, and talk to me about moments when you felt deeply disengaged with your work. Talk to me about moments of deep gratification and moments where you felt like, I can't wait until this is over. And then see if you can begin identifying some patterns with them. You know what? It seems like you're most engaged when you're working with other people on a team. It seems like that's when you tend to be most engaged. Are there ways we could find to help you get engaged with a team more consistently? Because that seems like when you're describing those moments of engagement, that's what it is for you. Or it could be, it seems like you're most engaged when you excel in some way, when you're the head of the pack. How can we put you in a situation where you're doing more work that you excel at, where you're just you knock it out of the park every single time? Are there certain kinds of projects that we could put you on or whatever? You can begin to identify, maybe not in those three big categories of, builder, fixer, optimizer, but you can begin to identify some of the sub themes of that and try to help people align more of what they do with the circumstances that tend to bring out the best, most productive work in them. The way to get to that is to talk about instances where they were engaged, where they were delivering great value, and then see if you can craft more of those kinds of opportunities for them where it's possible. None of us get to choose all the work we get to do all day. None of us do. There's no perfect job. That's why it's a job, right? But we can, as managers, and it behooves the organization to try to figure out ways of putting people in positions where they're delivering a lot of value, because that's what they're there to do. So if we can make little micro adjustments in their job, maybe it's as simple as, instead of this person doing work on their own, we put a couple other people on the project with them so that they're working in a team, because we know that's going to deliver more value. It could be something as simple as that, but it all begins with conversation and making sure that you're illuminating those areas where they are deeply engaged, and then trying to replicate those as much as possible.
Hello, sir. My name is First Lieutenant Kyle Herntzer. So my question is kind of a two-part. It does with your response to Lieutenant Humison. So you talk about how you have the Warner Bros. Or Fox worker, sir. He goes, and when he's in his meetings, he can provide sometimes saying like, "Hey, sir, like I understand it's a great idea. How do you want me to put this on the back burner?" So we have situations where we can experience that stress in our lives with that work, but sometimes nothing goes on the back burner. Everything needs to be cooked right away. So when we're trying to do that, it kind of exposes some of the ghost rules we have. And as a leader, I'm experiencing it from, the top and the below pressure, right? So I have these ghost rules. For example, we have for a dispatch, you take a truck, you want to leave with it. There's a series of paperwork you have to do with it. So a lot of times I can get these soldiers saying like, "Hey, sir, we have this, and that to do. It takes X amount of time." Now, not all of it is required, but it's one of those things where like, "Hey, we've always done it this way, so we're going to do it this way." And with the new constraints we have with our time and priorities mixed, it clashes with each other because of the time it takes to do simple paperwork like this and the time it takes to still make everything a priority. So how would you recommend, with, you're kind of stuck in the middle with these both problems, being a leader to, break it up and execute still while maintaining the superior and the lower trust?
That's a great question, and it's I will say it is a unique situation that you're in. I mentioned highly regulated organizations and highly regulated industries. It's the military is a highly regulated force, and for good reason, right? You're the longest standing organization in our country, and there's a reason for that. It's because there's conformity in process and conformity in expectation. At the same time, regulation can lead to a dynamic I call unnecessary complexity. Unnecessary complexity is when things, systems and bureaucracy and expectations layer upon each other to the point that it makes it really difficult to discern, why are we even doing this? This isn't necessary anymore. But because it's always been the case, it exists. We're really good at adding expectations, adding complexity. We're not good at taking away complexity. And so it's a really difficult situation because you're facing pressure from above to conform, I'm certain, to whatever those regulations are, and also pressure from below that, hey, is this really necessary? There's a great principle I came across in writing Herding Tigers. It was by G.K. Chesterton. It was called Chesterton's Fence. And he was arguing, the great theologian was arguing, if you come across a fence in a field, don't remove the fence unless you know why the fence was put there to begin with. There could be a very good reason for a lot of those regulations that seem silly in the moment. And so we get back to this principle of understanding the why and not just the what. Maybe it's a barrier in a specific circumstance, but maybe that barrier is there for a reason, and it's difficult to know. And so my encouragement would be to have a conversation with your manager or your leader and your leader's leader or whoever it is, and try to understand the nature of those regulations. there's definitely benefit to streamlining process, but also as you streamline process, you decrease stability and you increase the potential for chaos in the organization. Your variability in a military environment, I could see where that would be a real challenge. So I don't have a really good answer, not knowing the organization, as well as you do, but I would just say it warrants a conversation, not just about what, but about why. And I think sometimes in highly regulated organizations, why is not an invited question. But I think that could be a very helpful question if you really want to understand the governing dynamics of some of the decisions and processes that are in place. So I'm sorry, I don't have a better strategic answer than that, but I think asking why can help shed some light on some of the governing dynamics behind why some of those things are in place. And again, it could be Chesterton's fence. It could be that it's there for a reason that you don't see right now, because there's a herd of cattle over the hill or whatever that you can't see. So.
All right, Todd, so to respect your time, this will be our last question.
Hello, I'm Second Lieutenant Robertson. Mine is actually a comment, it's not more so a question. But so in the book, you talked about being creative and allowing your subordinates to be creative. And I thought that was a really good point, because I know me coming in as a new leader and as a new platoon leader, it's important to have different ideas ideas that are outside of the box. But sometimes you do have, your higher ups who kind of try to bring you down and let you think about it and make sure that you're actually making the right decision, and it's efficient and time efficient as well. And then that also tied into what you said earlier when you were talking about how leaders should always have your back, or how a leader should always have your back as a subordinate. I think that's a really good point as well that you talked about, because at the end of the day, if that idea that I had that is so far out, if it does fail, it's good to know that I have someone who is above me that can say, okay, you messed up, but I got your back. So
yeah, absolutely. Excellent. I'm glad that resonated with you. And one point, really quick point also of additional clarification on the risk thing. There are failures of execution, and there are failures of insight. A failure of execution that is executed in goodwill, but it just failed. For whatever reason, it just failed. People should not be punished for just failing when they're trying to do something everybody thought was a good idea. It just didn't work for whatever reason. There's a kind of failure that is a failure of effort, or a lack of discipline, or a lack of insight. That's a totally different circumstance, right? There's smart risk and there's dumb risk. Dumb risks obviously should never be tolerated, but smart risks should always be rewarded. And so, so I appreciate that, that resonated with you, because that, I know for me, that's definitely been a huge thing in my life, in my career, when I knew I had a leader who was willing to stand behind me if I made a mistake or if I failed, because they knew I was trying to do what was best for the organization and for the people we were serving. That always gave me a tremendous boost of confidence to go out there and really, spend myself fully on behalf of whatever it is that we were doing. So thank you. I'm glad that resonated with you.
Hey, Todd, I was going to say, I had a longer closing in mind when we started this, but after listening to the presentation today, I just want to say thank you so much for helping us plant the trees that provide that shade for future generation of Army leaders. Thank you for your time, Todd.
Thank you, and thank you so much for all of you for all that you do. It's just a deeply, deeply humbling experience to be here. Thank you.
All right, Todd, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.